Episode 1. The Boy Who Drew in the Dark. The lawyers surround the mahogany table. It's 1966, and Walt Disney lies in a hospital bed, wasted by the cancer eating away at his lungs. Outside, in Anaheim, California, millions of people walk through a castle he built with his own broken hands. Inside that sterile room, a man who created entire worlds can barely breathe. But in his mind, there's still one last project. A city of the future that will change the world forever. No one knows that in 48 hours, it will all be over. The question that haunts his agony is simple and terrifying. Was it worth it? Was it worth every betrayal, every nervous breakdown, every sleepless night for 40 years? To answer that, we must go back to the beginning, to a coal barn in Missouri, where a 5-year-old boy discovered he could create magic with a lump of coal and a white wall. It's 1906. Dawn breaks over Marceline, Missouri, painting the endless wheat fields orange. The Disney family has just moved to a farm that promises a new beginning after years of poverty in Chicago. Elias Disney, the father, is a man of heavy hands and broken dreams. Flora, the mother, has tired eyes but a smile that never fades. And Walter Elias Disney, the fourth of 5 siblings, is barely 5 years old when he first enters the barn that will change his life. The barn smells of hay and manure. Light filters through the cracks in the wood, creating columns of golden dust. Walt finds a fallen lump of coal next to his father's rusty tools. He doesn't know why, but something in his childlike mind tells him that coal is more than fuel. It's a key. He stares at the barn's immaculate white wall, waiting, and he begins to draw. At first, it's just a clumsy circle. Then another, 2 ears, a smile, a horse. It's not perfect, but it's his. For the first time in his short life, Walt Disney feels he can create something that didn't exist before. That feeling is like electricity in his veins. He doesn't know it yet, but he's just been infected with the most beautiful and destructive disease in the world, the urge to create. But magic comes at a price. Elias Disney discovers the drawings that same afternoon. His face transforms into a mask of fury. For him, Walt has ruined his property, wasted time that should be dedicated to work. The farm doesn't forgive the imagination. The farm requires sweat, not dreams. The belt falls on Walt's back with a snap that breaks the evening silence. Once, twice, 3 times. Flora screams from the house. But Elias doesn't stop until the boy is crying on the dirt floor. That night, Walt learns the first brutal lesson of his life. The world punishes those who dare to create. But something else is born in that moment. Something not even Elias can beat to death. A steely stubbornness, a determination that decades later will move mountains. That night, as Walt touches the burning marks on his back, he doesn't think about giving up. He thinks about drawing more, bigger, farther out of reach of his father. Marceline's town is small, barely 4,000 lost souls in the heart of America, but it has a hidden treasure. Dr. Sherwood, the town doctor, who is also an amateur artist. When Walt is 7, Flora secretly takes him to the doctor's house after Elias goes out to sell apples in the neighboring town. Doc Sherwood has a studio full of paintings, landscapes, portraits, horses galloping on battlefields. He gives Walt his first real set of colored pencils and teaches him something no beating could teach him: technique, perspective, light and shadow. But more importantly, he teaches him that art isn't a sin. It's a language. For 2 years, Walt visits the doctor whenever he can escape the farm work. He draws obsessively. The pigs on the farm, the train roaring past his house, the trees that look gigantic against the endless Missouri sky. Each drawing is better than the last. Each line is more confident. But paradise never lasts. In 1911, when Walt is 10 years old, the Disney farm collapses. Debts pile up like snow in winter. Elias falls ill, probably with typhoid fever, and is too weak to maintain the land. Walt's older brothers, Herbert and Raymond, fed up with their father's beatings and tyranny, escape into the night without saying goodbye. Walt watches them leave from his bedroom window. 2 shadows running toward the woods in the moonlight. Part of him wants to scream at them to take him, but another part, the part already forming into steel, knows his path will be different. He won't run. He will conquer. The family sells a farm for a fraction of its value and moves to Kansas City. Walt takes one last look at the barn where he drew his first horse. The walls have been whitewashed again, erasing every charcoal stroke. It's as if his childhood never happened. But in his memory, those drawings shine brighter than ever. Kansas City is a brick-and-mortar monster compared to Marceline. Elias buys a newspaper delivery route and forces Walt and his brother Roy to get up at 3:30 a.m., 7 days a week, to deliver the Kansas City Star in the deadly winter cold. Walt is 11 years old and walks through icy streets carrying a sack of newspapers that weighs more than he does. His fingers crack from the cold. He falls asleep in class. Teachers punish him for falling, asleep at his desk. But Elias keeps every penny the children earn. Walt doesn't see a dollar of his own work. It's slavery disguised as a family lesson. And it marks Walt forever. Decades later, as he builds his empire, he'll never forget the silent theft of childhood, the way adults can crush a child's dreams under the guise of duty. But Kansas City also brings gifts. In 1913, Walt discovers the Electric Theater, a vaudeville palace where for 5 cents he can see comedy sketches, magic acts, and, most importantly, primitive animated short films. The first time you see Gertie the Dinosaur, an animated short film by Winsor McKay, something explodes in your brain. The drawings move. They walk. They breathe. It's impossible, but it's happening right before your eyes. It's not just static art on a wall. It's living art. Walt returns to the theater every time he steals a nickel from the paper route. He studies the short films as if they were sacred texts. He doesn't know how to do it, but he knows he must learn. That obsession is a seed planted in fertile ground. It will take years to germinate, but when it does, it will change the world. In 1917, the United States entered World War I. Walt's older brother, Roy, immediately enlisted in the Navy. Walt, just 16 years old, desperate to escape Kansas City and his father's control, tried to enlist as well, but he was too young. So he does what he'd do for the rest of his life. When the rules tell him he can't do something, he lies. He forges his birth certificate, changing 1901 to 1900, and joins the Red Cross as an ambulance driver. He's sent to France just as the war is ending. He spends a year in the mud-soaked hell of Europe, driving ambulances full of broken men. He sees death. He sees despair. But he also sees something else. He sees how soldiers draw obscene cartoons on trench walls to keep themselves sane. He sees how humor, even in horror, is the last thing to die in the human spirit. When he returns to Kansas City in 1919, Walt Disney is 18 years old and has $0 in his pocket. He's seen more than any teenager should, but he's not broken. He's hungry. His first job is at an advertising agency called Pesman Rubin Art Studio, drawing commercials for $40 a month. It's mindless, soulless work, but it's the first time in his life he's been paid to draw. The feeling is intoxicating. In that office, he meets up Iwerks, a young Dutch artist with technical skills that surpass even Walt's. Iwerks can draw anything with photographic precision, but he lacks the vision, the fire that burns in Walt. They recognize something in each other, two halves of a whole. A partnership is being born. In 1920, Walt convinced Iwerks to leave the agency and start his own studio, Iwerks Disney Commercial Artists. They were 20 years old, with no business experience, no real connections. They lasted exactly 1 month before going bankrupt. Walt gets a job at the Kansas City Film Ad Company, a company that produces primitive advertising shorts using animation techniques. It's there in that ramshackle building that Walt finally learns the secret behind Gertie the Dinosaur. Stop motion, single frames, the illusion of movement through persistence of vision. Every night, after everyone else leaves, Walt stays in the office experimenting with a borrowed camera. He draws, photographs, draws, photographs, thousands of individual drawings to create seconds of movement. It's tedious. It's exhausting. It's the most beautiful thing he's ever done. In 1922, with a confidence fueled by ignorance, Walt founded Laugh-O-Gram Studios. He rented space on the second floor of a building in Kansas City, hired a small crew including iWorks, and began producing animated shorts based on fairy tales. Little Red Riding Hood, The Three Little Pigs, and Jack and the Beanstalk. The shorts are innovative for their time. They have personality. They have rhythm. Walt is creating something genuinely new. Local theaters are buying them. Everything seems to be working. But Walt knows nothing about business. He spends more than he earns. He pays late. His distributors rip him off, promising payments that never arrive. Within a year, Laugh-O-Gram Studios is bankrupt. Walt ends up living in his own office, eating cold beans straight from the can, and bathing in the train station. He's 21 years old and has failed spectacularly. Any rational person would give up, but Walt Disney was never rational. It's 1923. Walt sells everything he owns, including his camera, to buy a train ticket to Los Angeles. He has $40 in his pocket and a cardboard suitcase containing a borrowed suit. He tells Roy, who is now living in California recovering from tuberculosis, that he's come to start over. The train rolls through the Mojave Desert. Walt stares out the window at the endless landscape of sand and rocks. He has no plan. He has no connections. He has nothing except the irrational certainty that he can do this. When he arrives in Los Angeles, the city is a mirage of palm trees and perpetual sunshine. Hollywood is exploding with movie studios. Everyone comes here to pursue impossible dreams. Walt is just one in a crowd of desperate dreamers. But there's something different about him. A hunger that knows no satiation. A vision that won't take no for an answer. In his first week in Los Angeles, Walt tries to get a job as a director at any studio that's open. He's rejected by all. Too young, inexperienced, no real portfolio. He's sitting on a park bench, counting his remaining coins, $2.15. Enough to eat today. Tomorrow is a mystery. Then he remembers something. In Kansas City, just before closing Laugh-O-Gram, he had begun experimenting with a new character, a real-life girl who interacted with animated characters. It was called Alice's Wonderland. He only completed a pilot before the money ran out. That night, Walt writes a letter to Margaret Winkler, a New York distributor who had shown lukewarm interest in his Kansas City shorts. He offers her a complete Alice series, half live action, half animated, something no one has done before. He puts the letter in the mailbox and waits. His entire future depends on a responsible woman who doesn't even remember his name. What Walt doesn't know is that letter, that desperate act of a ruined man, is about to change not only his life, but the way the entire world understands entertainment. But first, he'll have to survive the hell that's coming. Episode 2, The Mouse Who Saved an Empire. 3 weeks later, a thin envelope arrives at Roy's home in Los Angeles. Walt opens it with trembling hands. Inside is a typewritten letter from Margaret Winkler. She's interested in Alice's Wonderland. She wants a series, 12 short films, $1,500 per episode. Walt reads the letter 3 times to make sure it's real. Roy, still weak from tuberculosis, smiles from his bed. Looks like you're in the movie business, little brother. With the contract in hand, Walt convinces Roy to invest his entire savings, $285, in founding Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio. They rent a small space in the back of a real estate agency on Kingswell Avenue. The studio is basically a garage with 2 borrowed desks and a used camera. Walt convinces iWorks to leave Kansas City and join him in California. He also hires his first actress, Virginia Davis, a 4-year-old girl who will play the real-life Alice. The crew is tiny. The budget is non-existent. But they're making movies. For 3 years, from 1923 to 1926, Disney Brothers produced 56 Alice short films. They were successful. They didn't break records, but they were distributed nationally. For the first time in his life, Walt Disney had something resembling stability, but stability was never enough for him. Each short must be better than the last, smoother, funnier, more technically ambitious. Walt reinvests every penny of profit into improving quality. Roy begs him to save some for emergencies. Walt ignores each plea. In 1925, Walt marries Lillian Bounds, a young woman who works painting animation cells in his studio. Lillian is quiet where Walt is explosive, practical where he is dreamy. She doesn't fully understand his obsession with animation, but she understands that this obsession is the essence of who he is. The marriage is solid, but will always be secondary to Walt's true love, his work. In 1926, Margaret Winkler married Charles Mintz, a more aggressive distributor. Mintz wanted something new, something more commercial than Alice. He asked Walt to create a fully animated character, without real actors. Walt and Iwerks designed Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, an anthropomorphic rabbit with long ears and a mischievous personality. Oswald is an instant hit. Theaters love him. Distributors love him. For the first time, Walt Disney has a star character who can compete with Felix the Cat. Over the course of 18 months, the studio produces 26 Oswald shorts. Each one is more successful than the last. Walt expands a crew, improves his technique, perfects his comic timing. Everything is working. So, in 1928, Walt travels by train to New York to renegotiate his contract with Mintz. He wants more money per episode. He deserves more money. Oswald is a gold mine, but Mintz has other plans. The meeting takes place in Mintz's Manhattan office. Walt enters expecting a negotiation. Instead, he gets an execution. Mintz coldly informs him that not only will he not increase the payment, but he'll reduce it. And if Walt doesn't agree, Mintz will produce the Oswald shorts without him. How so? Because it turns out Mintz cleverly retained the copyright to Oswald. Walt created the character, but he doesn't own him. Mintz owns Oswald. Even worse, Mintz has been secretly contacting Walt's animators, offering them more money to leave Disney Brothers and work directly for him. Most have accepted. Only Iwerks remains loyal. Walt leaves that office destroyed. He's lost his character. He's lost his team. He's lost everything again. On the train back to California, he stares out the window at the dark landscape. Lillian sits next to him, holding his hand. They don't speak for hours. It was on that train, on that dark night in 1928, that Walt Disney learned the most important lesson in his life. Never, ever again, lose creative control. Never depend on someone else to own your creations. It is also on that train that the legend that will save his life is born. Walt takes out a pencil and begins drawing on the back of a used telegram. First a circle, then another. 2 large, round ears. A long, thin tail. It's not a rabbit. It's a mouse. He shows the sketch to Lillian. How about Mortimer Mouse? He asks. Lillian wrinkles her nose. Mortimer sounds presumptuous. How about Mickey? Mickey Mouse. Simple, accessible, perfect. When they arrive in Los Angeles, Walt wastes no time complaining. He gathers his few remaining animators and announces a plan. They will create short films featuring Mickey Mouse. They will be better than Oswald. They will be revolutionary. But they have a problem. They're broke again. Walt and Iwerks work like mad. In May 1928, they release Plain Crazy, the first Mickey Mouse short film. Mickey tries to impress Minnie by building an airplane. Everything goes hilariously wrong. It's charming. It's innovative. Distributors hate him. No one wants to buy him. It's just another cartoon, they say. They don't see anything special about that mouse in shorts. Walt produces a second short, The Galloping Gaucho. Same result. Nobody wants it. Roy begs him to leave Mickey and find a steady job. The studio is on the verge of bankruptcy again. They can't survive another failure. But Walt has one final idea, a bet that will either save them or destroy them completely. You've read about a new technology that's revolutionizing filmmaking, synchronized sound. The Jazz Singer, released the previous year, proved that audiences are hungry for movies with sound. Why not make the first animated film with fully synchronized sound? It's crazy. The technology is expensive and complicated. It requires synchronizing each animated movement with music and sound effects. No one has done this with animation before because it's technically nearly impossible. Walt mortgages his house. He borrows from every friend and relative. He works 24 hours a day for months on a single 7-minute short film, Steamboat Willie. The plot is simple. Mickey pilots a steamboat down a river, creating music using animals as instruments. but the execution is pure magic. Every whistle, every beat, every musical note is perfectly synchronized with the animation. It's as if the drawings were actually making the sound. On November 18, 1928, Steamboat Willie premieres at the Colony Theater in New York. Walt is in California, too nervous to watch the reaction in person. He waits by the telephone. When it plays, it's Roy. He's crying from happiness. The theater erupted in applause. People had never seen anything like it. Distributors are fighting over the rights. Mickey Mouse just saved Walt Disney from oblivion. The next 3 years are a whirlwind. Mickey Mouse becomes a cultural phenomenon. He's not just a cartoon character. He's an icon. Children love him. Adults love him. He appears on merchandise, toys, books, clothing. Walt produces dozens of Mickey Mouse shorts, each more ambitious than the last. He adds Minnie as Mickey's perpetual girlfriend. He creates Pluto as his dog. He introduces Goofy and Donald Duck. The Disney universe is growing. In 1932, Walt won his first Academy Award for Flowers and Trees, the first Technicolor animated film. It's validation. It's proof that his obsession wasn't madness. But success brings new problems. Competitors copy his techniques. Distributors demand more content, faster and cheaper. And Walt, never satisfied, begins to dream of something bigger than 7-minute short films. Something no one has attempted before. Something impossible. In 1934, during a dinner with his team, Walt announces his next project, a feature-length animated film. 70 minutes. A complete story. Characters with real emotional arcs. Everyone thinks he's lost his mind. Cartoons are for children, for short films between real movies. No one will sit through an hour of cartoons. It's financially suicidal. Walt chooses to adapt Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. It's a well-known fairy tale, but he plans to make it different. Dark, emotional, visually stunning. He wants audiences to cry. He wants audiences to feel. Roy shows him the numbers. It'll cost $500,000, an astronomical fortune. They don't have a tenth of that money. The banks laugh when Walt asks for loans. 1-hour cartoons sounds like the most expensive joke in Hollywood. But Walt can't be stopped. He mortgages everything again. His house, his studio, his life insurance. He convinces Bank of America to lend him against projected future earnings. It's the most insane bet of his life. The production of Snow White spans 3 years, from 1934 to 1937. The budget explodes. $500,000 becomes $1 million, then $1.5 million. Hollywood dubs it Disney's Folly. The animators work 16-hour shifts. Walt is ruthless, rejecting entire scenes that aren't perfect. He screams. He inspires. He breaks down. But slowly, frame by frame, the film comes to life. On December 21st, 1937, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered at the Carthay Circle Theater in Los Angeles. Hollywood's biggest stars were in attendance. Charlie Chaplin, Marlene Dietrich, Jack Benny. Walt sits in the background, biting his nails until they bleed. If this fails, he loses everything. His house, his studio, his legacy. The lights go down. The film begins. For 73 minutes, the audience is mesmerized. When the Wicked Witch transforms, the children scream. When the dwarfs cry over Snow White's glass coffin, the adults cry with them. When the credits roll, the theater erupts in a 10-minute standing ovation. Walt can't speak. He can only cry. Snow White earned $8 million in its initial release, more than any other film that year. It became the highest-grossing film of all time until The Wind Gone the Wind surpassed it 2 years later. Walt Disney has just proven that animation can be a legitimate art form. He has changed Hollywood forever. But success comes at a price. Walt is exhausted. He's gained weight. He smokes 3 packs of cigarettes a day. His nerves are frayed. And for the first time, something inside him is permanently broken. During the production of Snow White, Walt suffered his first nervous breakdown. He was found in his office, shaking, unable to speak for hours. Doctors diagnosed him with nervous exhaustion. He was ordered to rest. Instead, Walt immediately began working on 3 more films simultaneously. Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Bambi. He can't stop. If he stops, the demons will get him. And there's another problem brewing. Their exhausted and underpaid facilitators begin meeting in secret. They talk about unions, strikes, equality. Walt, who sees himself as a benevolent father, is about to learn that even dreams have to pay fair wages. It's 1938. Walt Disney is on top of the world. He's famous. He's rich. He has the respect of an industry that despised him. But one night, alone in his office, he reviews the accounting books. Despite the success of Snow White, the studio is once again close to bankruptcy. The 3 new films are draining resources faster than Snow White can replenish them. And then he receives a report from his animation manager. The employees are organizing a union vote. They want better conditions, more pay, respect. Walt crumples the paper and throws it in the trash. "Over my dead body," he mutters. He doesn't know he's just planted the seeds for the worst betrayal of his life. A betrayal that won't come from external enemies, but from the very people who helped him build his empire. The war is about to begin. And this time, it will be in your own home. Episode 3. The Strike That Broke Her Heart. It's 1939. Disney's Burbank studio is a gleaming palace of glass and steel, built with the profits from Snow White. 500 employees work in facilities that look more like a college campus than a factory. Gardens, a subsidized cafeteria, a gym, free art classes. Walt walks the halls every morning greeting his boys by name. He doesn't see them as employees. He sees them as family. He has created a haven for artists where they can fully dedicate themselves to their art without worldly worries. But beneath the polished surface, something is rotting. Low-level animators earn $18 a week, while supervisors earn $300. There are no clear promotions. There is no job security. Walt decides he gets promoted based on personal loyalty, not merit. It's feudalism disguised as paternalism. And there's something else. Walt has begun to give public credit only to his 9 old men, the inner circle of elite animators. The hundreds of artists who do the real work remain anonymous, invisible. Art Babbitt is the studio's best animator. He created Goofy. He animated the witch scene in Snow White. He's a technical genius, and he knows it. He's also a man of fierce principles. In 1940, Babbitt began organizing secret meetings with other animators. They discussed forming a guild, joining the Screen Cartoonist Guild. They wanted written contracts, transparent pay scales, and on-screen credit for all artists. Walt learns from his inside spies. The news feels like a stab. These men he has nurtured, trained, and elevated are now betraying him. For Walt, it's not a labor dispute. It's a family betrayal. A son rejecting his father. He summons Babbitt to his office. The conversation is brief and brutal. Walt tells him that unions would destroy the magic of the studio, turning art into manufacturing. Babbitt responds that without fair protections, artists are just well-treated slaves. Walt fires Babbitt on the spot. It's the first mistake in a series of catastrophic events. While the labor dispute boils over, Walt is completely absorbed in Fantasia, his most ambitious project to date. It's not a traditional narrative film. It's a visual symphony. 8 animated segments set to classical music. Bach, Tchaikovsky, Beethoven, Stravinsky. It's pure art. It's exactly what Walt always wanted to do. Elevate animation beyond entertainment into something transcendent. He developed a revolutionary multi-channel sound system called Fanasound. He pushed animation to technical limits that won't be reached again for decades. But Fantasia is also a financial disaster in the making. It cost $2.5 million to make. It opens in November 1940, just as Europe is at war and international markets are collapsing. American audiences, expecting light entertainment, find a pretentious 2-hour film with classical music. Fantasia loses money. A lot of money. Roy is terrified. Banks threaten to foreclose on the loans. The studio is bleeding cash while Walt refuses to acknowledge the failure. At the same time, Walt is producing Pinocchio, which is released in February 1940. It is technically superior to Snow White in every way. The animation is more fluid, the backgrounds are more detailed, the emotions are deeper. The scene where Pinocchio and Geppetto escape from Monstro the whale is one of the most impressive technical achievements in the history of animation. Every drop of water, every wave, is hand-drawn. Minutes of film took months to complete. But Pinocchio is also losing money. European markets are closed because of the war. American audiences are scared off by scenes like the transformation of children into donkeys on Pleasure Island. Too dark for family entertainment. Walt has produced two masterpieces in a row that are financially destroying his studio. The irony is painfully clear. His artistic genius is killing his business. In August 1941, under pressure from the U.S. government, Walt agreed to travel to South America as a goodwill ambassador. This was part of the propaganda effort prior to the United States' entry into World War II. Washington wanted to keep Latin America out of Axis influence. Walt sees the trip as an opportunity to escape the financial and work hell of Burbank. He brings along a team of artists to develop ideas for future films inspired by South American culture. But it's also an escape. Walt is emotionally exhausted. The pressures are destroying him. He smokes incessantly. He drinks more than usual. His hands shake when he thinks about returning to the studio. While he's in Brazil, drawing parrots and samba dancers, his empire is crumbling in California. Walt returns from South America on May 27th. 2 days later, on May 29th, 1941, the unthinkable happens. 300 of his 500 animators walk out of the studio and picket the doors. It's the Disney strike. Hand-painted signs declare, "I'm Snow White, but I get paid like a dwarf." Cruel cartoons depict Walt as a tyrant with a bag of money. The strikers sing protest songs. Walt arrives that morning expecting to work. He sees the crowds, the signs, the faces of men he considered friends. Something inside him snaps permanently. He will later describe this moment as worse than any financial failure, worse than losing Oswald, worse than anything his father ever did to him. This is betrayal. Betrayal of the family he created. The strike lasts 9 hellish weeks. The strikers block the doors. Non-strikers have to cross the picket lines every day under insults and spitting. The studio becomes a battlefield. Walt refuses to negotiate. He sees the strike as a communist plot, an infiltration by outside agitators. In meetings with loyal employees, he gives paranoid speeches about how subversive elements are destroying his dream. There's truth and folly intertwined in their reasoning. Some union organizers have communist sympathies. This is 1941, and the left is active in Hollywood. But most of the strikers simply want fair wages and recognition. Walt can't see that distinction. For him, everything is black or white, absolute loyalty or total betrayal. There's no middle ground in the Walt Disney universe. Roy, ever the pragmatic brother, begs Walt to give in. The studio can't survive a prolonged strike. Bank of America threatens to cut off credit. Production is at a standstill. They're losing $50,000 a week. But Walt refuses. If I give in, they'll have won. And if they win, everything I've worked for means nothing. Finally, Roy overruled Walt and negotiated directly with the union. On September 9th, 1941, the strike ended. The studio recognized the Screen Cartoonists Guild. Wages increased. Credits were distributed equitably. The strikers have won, and Walt Disney will never forgive them. When employees return to work, the studio is an emotional graveyard. Walt no longer walks the halls greeting people. He locks himself in his office. When he has to interact with former strikers, his face hardens like stone. Create mental lists of who was loyal and who betrayed you. Traitors will never be promoted again. They will never receive important projects. They will be tolerated but never forgiven. It's a silent purge that will last for years. Art Babbitt, the strike leader, is fired as soon as legally possible. He sues for wrongful termination. The legal battle drags on for years, leaving scars on both sides. But the greatest damage is internal. Something died in Walt during that strike. The part of him that believed in unconditional loyalty, in the studio family, in the fact that love could overcome differences. That part turned to ash. The man who emerges is tougher, more cynical, more willing to see enemies around every corner. On December 7th, 1941, 3 months after the end of the strike, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. The United States entered World War II. That same night, 500 U.S. Army soldiers occupied the Disney studio. They turned it into a military facility for producing training films, propaganda, and insignia design. Walt has no choice. The government has requisitioned his studio. For the next 4 years, 70% of the studio's output will be military work. They produce Victory Through Air Power, a propaganda film about bombing strategy. They produced Der Führer's Face, a short film in which Donald Duck has a nightmare about being a Nazi. It's necessary work. It's patriotic. But it's not what Walt wants to do. Every day in the commandeered studio is a reminder of everything he's lost. Control, creative freedom, the family he built. In August 1942, amidst the chaos of war and military occupation, Bambi is released. It is Walt's most personal film, based on his love for the animals on Marceline's farm. Bambi is a meditation on lost innocence, on death, on the inevitable transition to adulthood. When Bambi's mother dies off-screen, it's one of the most devastating moments in animated film history. But Bambi also fails financially. Wartime audiences don't want sadness. They want escape. Bambi is too real, too painful. With his third consecutive commercial failure, Walt finally accepts reality. His loftiest artistic dreams aren't financially sustainable. After the war, he'll have to make compromises. He'll have to think like a businessman, not just an artist. It is the final death of his creative innocence. In 1945, when the war ends and the studios return to civilian control, Walt Disney is a fundamentally changed man. He is 44 years old but looks 60. His hair is completely gray. His eyes, once filled with manic brilliance, now show something darker, disappointment. He's learned that talent can betray him, that art doesn't always pay the bills, that even the purest dreams can be corrupted by the reality of money and power. But he's also learned something more dangerous, that total control is the only way to protect his vision. He'll never again allow others to have power over his creations. He'll never again blindly trust them. This lesson will shape every decision he makes for the next 2 decades. It will make him a titan of industry. It will also make him someone many will fear. One night in 1945, Walt sits alone in his office looking at the financial statements. The studio is millions in debt. They haven't produced a profitable film in 5 years. The banks are growing impatient. Then he notices something in a report. One of their war propaganda shorts, The Grain That Built a Hemisphere About South American Agriculture, mentions a concept, nature education packaged as entertainment. An idea begins to form. What if the future isn't movies? What if the future is something completely different? Something where he can have complete control from input to output? Walt takes out a pad of paper and begins to draw. It's not a character this time. It's a place where families can walk inside as movies, where children can meet Mickey in person, where every detail is controlled. Every experience is perfect. He tentatively calls it Mickey Mouse Park. He doesn't know yet that he's just drawn the outline of his true masterpiece, the thing that will define him more than any movie, the thing that will change global entertainment forever. But first, she'll have to survive the darkest decade of her life. A decade where the demons she's been suppressing will finally take their toll, and where he will have to make a decision that will haunt him until his last breath. Will he betray his own employees for un-American activities? The answer to that question will reveal who Walt Disney really became after the world broke his heart. Episode 4, The Informer and the Dark Years. It's October 1947. A messenger delivers an envelope to Walt Disney's office. Inside is a subpoena from a House Committee on Un-American Activities. Walt Disney is being summoned to testify in Washington about communist infiltration in Hollywood. The subpoena comes as no surprise. Since the strike of 1941, Walt has been convinced that communists orchestrated the rebellion in his studio. He has shared this theory with anyone who will listen, at parties, in business meetings, in private conversations with FBI agents. Now the government wants his official testimony, and Walt is more than willing to give it. On October 24th, 1947, Walt Disney sits before the committee in Washington. Cameras roll. Reporters fill the room. Under oath, Walt names names. Herbert Sorrell, the union organizer. David Hilberman, an animator. Bill Pomerantz, another employee. He accuses them of being communists who infiltrated his studio to destroy it from within. His testimony is passionate, almost maniacal. He describes the strike as a plot against the United States, not just Disney. Some of his accusations are true. Some organizers had communist sympathies. But Walt paints with a broad brush, implicating dozens of people whose only crime was wanting better wages. The consequences are immediate and brutal. The men Walt names are blacklisted in Hollywood. They can't find work. Their careers end. Some lose their homes. One has a nervous breakdown. Walt never expresses public remorse. Privately, Lillian asks him if he did the right thing. Walt replies with cold certainty, "I protected my studio. I protected America. That's all that matters." But something in his eyes suggests he's not as sure as he pretends. The nightmares begin around this time. Walt wakes up in the middle of the night sweating, muttering about traitors and invisible enemies. His alcohol consumption increases. His temper becomes more volatile. The employees learn to avoid him when he arrives at the studio in the morning. They can see on his face whether it will be a day of inspiration or terror. Financially, the studio is on the verge of total collapse. They haven't had a hit since Snow White a decade ago. The wartime package films, collections of shorts stitched together, were flops. The banks are demanding results or they'll turn off the tap. Roy gives Walt an ultimatum. The next film must be a hit or the studio will go bankrupt. There's no room for error. Walt chooses Cinderella. It's a safe bet, a classic fairy tale, similar in tone to Snow White. But after years of military work and low-budget projects, the team has lost practice in high-quality feature-length animation. Walt is involved in every frame. He is ruthless in critiques, rejecting entire sequences if a single movement is off. The animators work to the point of exhaustion. Some collapse at their drawing boards. But slowly, the magic returns. Cinderella's transformation is dazzling. The ballroom scene is romantic and elegant, and Bibbidi Bobbidi Boo becomes an instantly iconic song. Cinderella premieres on February 15, 1950. It's an absolute triumph. Audiences love it. Critics praise it. It earns $4 million in its first year, saving the studio from bankruptcy. Walt Disney is back. The king of animation has reclaimed his throne. But the man who occupies the throne is no longer the idealistic dreamer of 1937. He's someone more calculated, more aware of the risks, more protective of his power. He immediately greenlighted 3 new animated films, Alice in Wonderland, Peter Pan, and Lady and the Tramp. But his heart isn't entirely in animation anymore. He's obsessed with a different idea, one he's been secretly developing for 5 years. The amusement park. Mickey Mouse Park. Now called Disneyland. Walt has visited dozens of amusement parks with his daughters, Diane and Sharon. He hates them all. They're dirty. They're dangerous. They're full of dishonest operators and cheap rides. Parents sit on boring benches while the children play. Walt wants to create something different, a place where parents and children can enjoy together, where every detail is controlled to create a perfect immersive experience, where you can literally walk into a Disney World. He hires designer Harpagoff and begins developing plans. At first, he envisions something small, perhaps 8 acres behind the studio in Burbank. But the vision grows. Soon, he's drawing maps of a 160-acre park with 5 themed lands: Fantasyland, Adventureland, Frontierland, Tomorrowland, and Main Street, USA. Main Street is particularly personal. It's an idealized recreation of Marceline, Missouri, his childhood hometown. It's his way of preserving a past that no longer exists, of returning to before everything went wrong. Walt presents the Disneyland concept to Roy and the executive team. The reaction is unanimous. It's crazy. Amusement parks are dirty businesses with low margins. Disney is a movie company, not a carnival operator. Roy is particularly vehement. Walt, we almost went under 3 times because of your visions. I can't let you bet the studio on an amusement park again. But Walt doesn't ask permission. In 1952, using his own money, he founded WD Enterprises, a company separate from Disney Studios. Wade would own Disneyland. He would be the sole owner. It's a brilliant and manipulative move. If the park fails, the studio is protected. If it succeeds, Walt controls the profits completely. He has learned Oswald's lessons well. Never lose control. But there's a problem. Building Disneyland will cost $17 million. Walt has perhaps $1 million in personal assets. Banks refuse to lend him money for such a risky project. He needs a partner with deep pockets. In 1954, Walt does something he never imagined. He sells out to television. Television, which Hollywood sees as the enemy, the medium that's killing cinema. But Walt sees an opportunity. He negotiates a deal with ABC. They will invest $500,000 and guarantee loans for $4.5 million more. In return, Walt will produce a weekly television program called Disneyland that will promote the park. It's great. The TV show is basically an hour-long commercial that ABC pays to air. Walt uses clips from his old movies, behind-the-scenes footage, and promos for the park under construction. Disneyland, the TV show, becomes one of the most watched shows in the United States. Walt Disney becomes a constant presence in American homes, a trusted uncle figure who invites families into his magical world. On July 21st, 1954, Walt bought 160 acres of orange groves in Anaheim, California, for $4,800 per acre. It was cheap land in the middle of nowhere, 40 kilometers south of Los Angeles. Construction begins immediately. It's organized chaos. Walt is on site almost every day, micromanaging every detail. The Imagineers, as he calls his design team, quickly learn that there's no such thing as good enough in Walt's vocabulary. They build a fairy tale castle based on Neuschwanstein in Bavaria. They create a replica of the Mark Twain steamboat that actually floats. They design attractions like Jungle Cruise where every detail, from the animatronic animals to the guides' banter, is perfectly choreographed. It's like making a movie, except the movie is three-dimensional and the audience walks through it. It's the ultimate expression of Walt's total control. On July 17, 1955, Disneyland opens to the public. It's a disaster. 28,000 people flood the park, double the planned capacity. Many enter with counterfeit tickets, circulated in Los Angeles. Temperatures reach 38 degrees Celsius. The asphalt on Main Street is so cool that women's heels sink into it. Rides break down. Bathrooms overflow. Food runs out. A gas leak closes part of Fantasyland. The press calls it Black Sunday. Walt is devastated. He spent everything, risked everything, and opening day is a humiliating public failure. That night, alone in his temporary office in Park, he considers whether Roy was right, whether he's made the final mistake of his life. But something extraordinary happens on the 18th. Without the press frenzy and VIP guests, the park operates as designed. Families walk down Main Street with eyes of wonder. Children meet Mickey Mouse and cry tears of joy. Parents ride rides with their children, laughing together. In the first week, 50,000 people visited. In the first month, 500,000. In the first year, 3.5 million. Disneyland isn't just a success. It's a cultural phenomenon. The lines wrap around the blocks. Families save all year to afford the trip. It's become an American rite of passage. You've been to Disneyland. Walt walks through the park almost every day, observing the families. He's finally created something perfect, something he controls completely, a world that runs exactly according to his rules. The 1950s became a golden age. With the success of Disneyland, Walt expanded in all directions. He launched the Mickey Mouse Club, a children's television show that created superstar Mouseketeers. He produced Zorro for ABC, a live-action drama series. In 1959, Sleeping Beauty, the most expensive animated film ever produced up to that point, was released. It's visually dazzling with an art style inspired by medieval art, but it flops financially. Audiences find it too stylized, too distant. Walt isn't fazed. He no longer needs every movie to be a hit. Disneyland generates so much money that he can afford to take artistic risks. He's built an ecosystem where the different parts of the empire support each other. The films promote the park. The park sells merchandise. The merchandise finances new films. It's a self-sustaining cycle of money-making. But total control comes at a price. Walt has become impossible to please. Employees call him the old man behind his back with a mixture of respect and fear. He can be charming and cruel in the same conversation. His marriage to Lillian is stable but distant. She lives in her world. He lives in his. They see each other at family dinners, but they rarely connect emotionally. Walt's true love has always been his work. His daughters, now adults, have complicated relationships with him. Diane adores him but rarely sees him. Sharon feels like an outsider in her own family. Walt was an absent father, always at the studio or in the park. In private, Walt drinks more than he should. He smokes incessantly, 3 packs a day. He has a chronic cough, but ignores doctors' warnings. It's 1960. Walt Disney is 59 years old. He's one of the most famous men in the world. His empire generates $50 million a year. He has a park that receives 5 million visitors a year. But it's not enough. It's never enough. One night, while flying over Disneyland in his private plane, he looks down and feels something unexpected: dissatisfaction. Disneyland is perfect within its boundaries, but beyond the gates, a chaos of cheap motels, shoddy restaurants, and pirated souvenir shops has sprung up. He doesn't control the outside world, and that outside world is contaminating his creation. So you have an idea bigger than anything you've attempted before, an idea that will require secretly buying land, deceiving governments, and building an entire city from scratch. If he can control everything in Disneyland, why not create a place where he controls everything, period? Not just a park, a real city, where he designs the streets, the houses, the schools, where technology and urban planning perfect human life. It will be called Epcot, Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. It will be his final masterpiece, or his final madness. The problem is that to make it happen, he'll need something he's never had before: land, a lot of land, and he'll have to obtain it in absolute secrecy. The most daring operation of his life is about to begin, and when it's over, Florida will have changed forever. But time is running out. Something is growing inside his lungs. Something no amount of money or control can stop. Episode 5, The Florida Project and the Secret Kingdom. It's 1961. Walt Disney is in his private office on the 3rd floor of the fire department building at Disneyland. This is his secret sanctuary, the only place in the park where he can escape the crowds. The walls are covered with maps, architectural plans, and concept drawings. But these aren't plans for Disneyland. They're schematics of something much more ambitious: an entire city of the future. Epcot, Walt describes it to anyone who will listen. It will be a community of 20,000 permanent residents. Not tourist residents. People who will live and work in a city designed from the ground up to be perfect. No crime, no poverty, no ugliness. The streets will be organized in concentric circles. The center will be a climate-controlled corporate complex. Surrounding it will be high-density apartments. The outer rings will feature suburban houses with gardens. An elevated public transportation system will connect everything. Cars will be banned from the center. It's a planned utopia. It's total control applied to human life. It's also deeply disturbing if you think about the implications. A company city where Disney controls every aspect of existence. But Walt only sees the possibilities. He can finally prove that his ideas about design, technology, and community can make the world a better place. There's just one insurmountable obstacle. Epcot can't be built in California. There isn't enough land available near Disneyland. And what's worse, Anaheim's local governments have proven to be constant bureaucratic obstacles. Every Disneyland expansion requires months of negotiations with urban planners who don't understand its vision. Every change requires permits. Every permit means compromises. Walt doesn't want compromises. He wants absolute control. He needs a place where he can essentially operate as an autonomous government. A place where no one can tell him what he can or can't build. In November 1963, Walt calls a secret meeting with Roy and a small circle of close friends. He announces the plan. They will find a large tract of cheap land somewhere in the United States, buy it in absolute secrecy, and build a second Disney park that will be just a front for Epcot. The park will make money. Epcot will be the real project. Walt sends reconnaissance teams to explore locations all along the East Coast. They consider Texas. They rule out New York because of the weather. They look at North Carolina. But Florida still appears to be the perfect candidate. Warm weather year-round. No state income tax. A state legislature desperate for economic development. And most importantly, cheap and abundant land in the center of the state. In April 1964, Walt sends two men on a top-secret mission, Roy Disney and corporate lawyer Paul Helliwell. Their job, to find at least 10,000 acres of land near Orlando, Florida, and buy it without anyone knowing Disney was involved. If word gets out that Disney is buying, prices will skyrocket immediately. They must operate in the shadows, using shell companies and fake names. It's corporate espionage in its purest form. Helliwell creates a network of fictitious corporations, Latin American Development and Management Corporation, I-4 Corporation, Tomahawk Properties, and Reedy Creek Ranch Corporation, meaningless names that reveal no connection to Disney. For 18 months, from 1964 to 1965, these shell companies quietly bought up parcels of land in Orange and Osceola counties, wetlands, grasslands, depleted citrus lands. The sellers have no idea who's really buying. They think it's an oil company or maybe a generic real estate developer. Prices remain low, $180 per acre on average. By October 1965, Disney secretly owned more than 11,000 acres, twice the size of Manhattan, for just $5 million. It was the biggest real estate heist in Florida history. But the secret can't be kept forever. In October 1965, Orlando Sentinel reporter Emily Bavar notices a strange pattern in the county's land records. All these mysterious companies buy up adjacent land, and one of the lawyers involved previously worked for Disney. On October 20th, the Sentinel published, "Is Disney considering Orlando?" The article is speculative, but accurate. Walt has no choice. On November 15th, 1965, he calls a press conference at the Cherry Plaza Hotel in Orlando. Cameras roll. Reporters fill the room. Walt, 64 years old and visibly aged, officially announces the Florida project. There will be a new theme park, bigger than Disneyland. But more importantly, there will be Epcot, an experimental city where new technologies and new ways of urban living will be tested. It will be his final legacy, proof that Walt Disney was not just an entertainer, but a visionary who improved the world. But there's a massive legal problem. Florida's laws, building codes, environmental regulations, county governments that will want to weigh in on development. Walt needs something unprecedented, autonomous government power over his property. He needs Florida to basically hand over sovereignty to him. So Disney does what big corporations do. It buys the legislature, not with outright bribes. That would be illegal. With promises, jobs, economic development, tourist taxes. Disney promises to transform Central Florida from a citrus wasteland into a global tourist destination. The Florida legislature, dazzled by the economic projections, approves something called a Reedy Creek Improvement District. It's essentially a private government that gives Disney the authority to build whatever it wants, however it wants. Without outside approval, Disney can issue municipal bonds, build power plants, set building codes, operate its own police force and fire department. It's a corporation that functions like a state within a state. It's cool. It's scary. It's awesome. To promote the Florida project, Walt produced a short film in 1966. It was shown only to legislators, investors, and interest groups. The public would never see it during its lifetime. In the film, Walt describes Epcot with a passion he rarely displays. He walks around a giant three-dimensional map, pointing out where people will live, where they will work, how they will get around. He talks about monorails, underground technology, and houses of the future built from plastic. But there's something disturbing about his vision. Walt explains that Epcot residents won't be homeowners. Disney will be. There won't be retirees, only active workers. No one will be able to get stuck in the past, because the homes will be regularly replaced with new designs. It's a corporate utopia where the company controls everything. It's brilliant. It's dystopian. It's very Walt Disney. Perfect control disguised as progress. During the filming of that short, Walt coughs constantly. Production has to stop repeatedly to let him catch his breath. His face looks gaunt. He has lost a noticeable amount of weight. Lillian begs him to see a doctor. Walt refuses. He doesn't have time for doctors. Epcot needs his attention. There are 1,000 decisions only he can make. Finally, in October 1966, the pain in his neck became unbearable. He thought it was due to tension. Lillian literally forced him to go to the hospital. The doctors take x-rays. What they find leaves him silent for a moment too long. Then they ask Lillian to come into the room. Walt has advanced lung cancer. The tumor in his left lung is the size of a grapefruit. It has metastasized. His chances of survival are close to zero. They give him, optimistically, 2 years. Realistically, 6 months. Walt refuses to accept it. He's overcome poverty, failure, betrayal, war. He'll overcome this too. He tells the doctors to operate. Remove the lung. Remove both if necessary. On November 6, 1966, surgeons open Walt's chest. What they find is worse than they imagined. The cancer is everywhere. Lungs, lymph nodes, surrounding tissue. They close it up without doing anything. There's nothing to be done. When Walt wakes up from the anesthesia, he's told a white lie. The surgery was successful. The tumor was removed. Everything is clean. Walt, drugged and desperate to believe, accepts the lie. They give him chemotherapy. It does little except weaken him further. But Walt doesn't slow down his work. From his hospital bed, he gives instructions on the Florida project by phone. He reviews architectural plans. He makes design changes. By late November, Walt can no longer deny reality. He's dying. He can feel it in every painful breath. But Epcot doesn't exist yet. His masterpiece isn't finished. He calls a final meeting with his key team. They're in his hospital room, surrounding his bed. Walt, hooked up to tubes and monitors, uses his last bit of energy to describe exactly how Epcot should be built. He points to a map on the ceiling. Someone has tacked it there so he can see it from his bed. His trembling finger traces the circles of the city of the future. This, he whispers, this is where everything will change. But there's one problem Walt finally acknowledges. Epcot, as he envisions it, a real city with permanent residents, may be impossible. Who would want to live in a company town where Disney controls everything? Property laws, tenant rights. The problems are insurmountable. He orders his team to at least build the theme park. That will generate money to eventually build Epcot. Don't let it die on me, he tells them. In early December, Walt insists on leaving the hospital to visit the studio one more time. The doctors warn him that it's dangerous. Walt doesn't listen. He's wheeled around the Burbank studio lot. Employees weep openly when they see him. He's unrecognizable, skeletal, gray, moving in visible pain. Walt stops at the animation building. He watches the young artist drawing. They remind him of himself 40 years ago in Kansas City, hungry and full of impossible dreams. Keep making magic, he tells them. These are his last public words to his employees. Walt is readmitted to the hospital on December 12th. His condition deteriorates rapidly. His organs begin to fail. Doctors administer morphine for pain. Lillian is with him constantly. His daughters come and go. Roy, his brother, the man who made all his dreams possible, sits by the bed holding Walt's hand. Walt is mostly unconscious, but occasionally wakes up. He mutters about Epcot, about the Florida park, about unfinished business. Roy promises him, "We'll finish it, brother. We'll finish it for you." At 9:30 in the morning on December 15th, 1966, Walter Elias Disney stopped breathing. He was 65 years old. The news is kept secret for hours while the family prepares. Finally, that afternoon, the Disney company issues a one-sentence press release. Walt Disney, showman of the world, died today at St. Joseph Hospital. The world stops. It's as if a star's gone out. Newspapers publish special editions. Television stations interrupt regular programming. At Disneyland, the flag is lowered to half-staff. Thousands of people come to the park to mourn. They leave flowers on Main Street. They write messages of gratitude. They weep in front of the castle. Because Walt Disney wasn't just a businessman. He was the architect of their childhoods, the guardian of innocence, the man who promised them that magic was real. His body is cremated 2 days later in a private ceremony. There is no public funeral. There is no grave. Walt wanted to disappear quietly as he had appeared. A poor boy from Missouri who had dreams too big for this world. But the story doesn't end with his death. In the boardroom of Walt Disney Productions, 3 days after the funeral, Roy Disney calls an emergency meeting. The board wants to cancel the Florida project. Without Walt, it doesn't make sense. It's too expensive, too risky, too complex. Roy, 73 years old, exhausted from decades of being the voice of reason against his brother's fantasies, does something unexpected. He stands up, bangs the table, and announces, "We'll build the park in Florida. We'll call it Walt Disney World, so everyone knows it was his dream. I won't let my brother's last wish go unfulfilled." It's the first time in 50 years that Roy has defied consensus to pursue an impossible dream. He's absorbed some of Walt's madness. Construction will begin in 18 months. It will be the largest private construction project in U.S. history. It will cost $400 million. And buried in the plans, hidden from public view, are still schematics for Epcot, the city of the future, the corporate utopia Walt envisioned. But without Walt to carry it out, Epcot will become something completely different, something that honors his vision, but betrays his essence. The question that will haunt the company for decades is simple. Did they build the empire Walt wanted? Or did they build something he would never have recognized? To answer that, we must enter the strangest period in Disney history, the years without Walt, when a dead man still controlled the living. Episode 6, The Ghost in the Machine. It's January 1967. For weeks after Walt's death, the executive offices of Walt Disney Productions are unnaturally quiet. Executives walk through the halls whispering, as if a loud sound might be disrespectful. Roy Disney assumes complete operational control for the first time in his life. For 45 years, he was a pragmatic brother, the one who said no to Walt's fantasies. Now he must be the one who says yes. But there's a paralyzing problem. No one knows how to be Disney without Disney. Every creative decision for 4 decades went through Walt. He approved every character design, every script, every song. He was the ultimate filter between idea and execution. Now that filter is gone, and the remaining executives are terrified of making the wrong decisions. A strange culture develops at the studio. Before every creative meeting, someone inevitably asks, "What would Walt have done?" They try to channel a dead person. They study old notes looking for clues. They play recordings of their voices looking for guidance. It's like running a company through a corporate seance. Card Walker, who became CEO, institutionalized this. He established that every major project must be evaluated against a simple standard. Would Walt have approved it? It sounds like respect. In reality, it's paralysis. Because no one can be sure what Walt would have wanted. And when in doubt, they choose the safest, most conservative path. Innovation freezes. For the next 15 years, Disney will produce films, but it will rarely take risks. It will stick to proven formulas. It will recycle old ideas. The studio that once led the industry becomes a follower. But there's one project they can't afford to hesitate on, Walt Disney World. Roy has staked his legacy on its completion. Construction officially begins in April 1967. 9,000 workers invade the swamps of Central Florida. They drain 32 square kilometers of wetlands. They build drainage canals. They build castles. It's engineering on a scale that makes the Hoover Dam seem modest. They build an entire underground system of utility tunnels called utilidors so employees can move around unseen. They move 45 million cubic meters of earth to create artificial lakes and hills in a perfectly flat landscape. The Magic Kingdom, the first park, is essentially a larger version of Disneyland. Same castle, same Main Street, same themed lands. but bigger in every way. On October 1st, 1971, Walt Disney World opens to the public. It's an immediate success. 10,000 visitors on the first day. 1 million in the first 2 months. Roy Disney attends the opening ceremony. At 78 years old, frail and tired, he cuts the ceremonial ribbon. He gives a short speech in which he calls the park a tribute to my brother's genius and vision. But something has snapped inside Roy. For the first time in his life, he has no clear purpose. He's fulfilled his promise to Walt. The empire is secure. What's left for him? 2 months later, on December 20th, 1971, Roy Disney suffered a massive cerebral hemorrhage. He died instantly. He is buried next to Walt in Forest Lawn Cemetery. With Roy dead, the last connection to the original Disney is severed. The company is truly orphaned. The 1970s were brutal for Disney. Without strong creative leadership, the studio produced a series of forgettable animated films. The Aristocats, Robin Hood, and The Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. They're competent but soulless films. They follow formulas. They recycle animation from old films to save costs. Animators call this technique xerography and hate it, but executives love it because it's cheap. Don Bluth, one of the studio's most talented animators, finally has enough. In 1979, he publicly resigned, taking 11 key animators with him. His resignation letter is devastating. We left because we could no longer support the belief that the animation being produced here was of sufficient Walt Disney quality. It is a public declaration that the studio founded by Walt Disney is no longer Disney in all but name. Meanwhile, the company finally builds Epcot. But it's not the city of the future Walt imagined. It's a theme park. It opened on October 1st, 1982. It has 2 sections. Future World, with corporate pavilions sponsored by General Motors, Exxon, and AT&T showcasing technology, and World Showcase, a circuit of pavilions representing 11 countries. It's educational. It's technically impressive. It's also completely sterile. There are no permanent residents. There's no real urban experimentation. It's Disneyland disguised as a permanent World's Fair. The Imagineers who work with Walt are heartbroken. This isn't what he wanted. But without Walt to fight for the impossible vision, executives chose a safe and profitable option. Epcot becomes a perfect symbol of post-Walt Disney. Competent, polished, soulless. In 1984, Disney faced its greatest existential crisis. Corporate investor Saul Steinberg launched a hostile takeover bid. He wanted to acquire Disney, sell off the assets piecemeal, and make a massive profit. For Disney, it would be the end. The park sold to different owners. The film library fragmented. The legacy destroyed. Roy E. Disney, Roy's son and Walt's nephew, mount a desperate defense. He convinces the board to hire Paramount's Michael Eisner as CEO and Frank Wells as president. Eisner and Wells saved Disney by buying Steinberg shares for an inflated price, the green mail. It's technically legalized extortion, but it works. Disney survives. But the price is high. The company is now in the hands of executives who have no emotional connection to Walt's legacy. For them, Disney is a business, not a mission. Surprisingly, Eisner turns out to be exactly what Disney needs. He's ruthless, ambitious, and understands that Disney has been playing it too safe. His strategy is simple. Embrace what Walt would have hated. Eisner creates Touchstone Pictures to produce films aimed at adults. Down and Out in Beverly Hills, Ruthless People, Good Morning Vietnam. Films that would never bear the Disney logo, but generate huge profits. In animation, Eisner rehires Jeffrey Katzenberg and gives him a mandate to make animated films that compete with the big live-action hits. No more mediocrity. No more asking, what would Walt have done? On November 17th, 1989, The Little Mermaid premiered. It was the first truly animated film, exceptional that Disney has produced in 30 years. The animation is fluid and expressive. The songs by Alan Menken and Howard Ashman are perfect. Ariel is a female character with real agency, not just a passive princess awaiting rescue. The Little Mermaid earned $84 million in its initial release. But more importantly, it proves that Disney animation can be relevant again. Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King follow. each one better and more successful than the last. The Lion King alone generates nearly $1 billion globally. It's the Disney Renaissance. And paradoxically, it only happens when the company stops asking what Walt would have done. Eisner builds Disney into a perfect corporate machine. Every intellectual property is squeezed for every possible profit. An animated film becomes merchandise, park attractions, direct-to-video sequels, Broadway shows, and themed cruises. He calls it synergy, making each part of the empire amplify all the other parts. It's financially brilliant. It's also exactly the kind of commercial exploitation that would have made Walt sick, but it generates billions. In 1995, Disney's revenue was $16 billion. Eisner is adored by Wall Street, but success breeds arrogance. Eisner becomes dictatorial. He rejects ideas. He micromanages. He alienates his best talents. In 1994, Jeffrey Katzenberg, the executive behind the Renaissance, resigned after Eisner refused to promote him. Katzenberg sued for breach of contract. The legal battle was ugly in public. Katzenberg eventually makes $250 million in the deal, but the damage is done. He uses the money to co-found DreamWorks with Steven Spielberg, becoming Disney's biggest competitor. Worse still, Frank Wells died in a helicopter crash in 1994. Wells was a perfect counterweight to Eisner, pragmatic where Eisner was visionary, diplomatic where Eisner was combative. Without Wells, Eisner has no one control him. The late 1990s and early 2000s saw Disney stumble. Traditional animation collapsed after the success of Pixar's Toy Story. Audiences wanted CGI, not hand-drawn images. Disney produces flop after flop. Atlantis, Treasure Planet, Home on the Range. Each one loses tens of millions. Eisner tries to buy Pixar, but Steve Jobs, Pixar CEO, hates him personally. Negotiations explode. Pixar announces it will end its distribution contract with Disney after Cars. It's catastrophic. Pixar has generated all of Disney's successful animated films in the last decade. Without Pixar, Disney has no future in animation. Roy E. Disney, now the last member of the Disney family on the board, finally has enough. In November 2003, he resigns from the board in protest. He publishes a devastating letter, "Accept Disney," he headlines. He accuses Eisner of micromanaging, of killing creativity, of betraying Walt's legacy. He launches a public Save Disney campaign asking shareholders to vote against Eisner. It's a corporate civil war. Walt's nephew versus the CEO who saved the company. In March 2004, 43% of shareholders voted against Eisner. It was a public humiliation. Eisner was stripped of his role as chairman of the board, although he remained CEO, but his time is up. In March 2005, Eisner announced his resignation. Disney's board faces an impossible choice. Who can lead Disney? They need someone who understands the legacy but isn't paralyzed by it. Someone who can innovate yet respect tradition. Someone who can compete with the new digital world of entertainment. They consider outside candidates. Then Roy E. Disney suggests something radical. Bob Iger, Eisner's number 2. Iger has been at Disney for years, but has never had the spotlight. He's quiet where Eisner was loud. He's diplomatic where Eisner was combative. His first decision as CEO will be his most important. Can he repair his relationship with Steve Jobs and Pixar? Or will he lose the animation studio that represents the future? And there's another question looming. 50 years after Walt's death, can Disney finally escape his shadow? Or will he be forever haunted by the ghost of a dead man? The answer will come in the most unexpected way possible. Not by honoring the past, but by buying into the future. Episode 7. The Empire Devours the World. It's October 2005. Bob Iger has been CEO of the Walt Disney Company for exactly 1 week. He's in his office in Burbank, looking at financial projections that reveal an uncomfortable truth. Disney is losing cultural relevance. Kids don't want animated princesses anymore. They want superheroes. They want video games. They want digital content they can consume on mobile devices. Disney feels outdated, a 20th century relic trying to survive in the 21st. Iger picks up a phone and dials a number he's memorized but never used. Steve Jobs. the CEO of Apple and Pixar, the man who hates Disney after years of fighting with Eisner. The conversation is awkward at first. Jobs doesn't trust Disney. But Iger does something Eisner never did. He apologizes. He acknowledges that Disney mistreated Pixar, and he makes a bold proposal. What if Disney simply bought Pixar? Jobs laughs. But it's a curious laugh, not a contemptuous one. How much are you thinking? $7 billion. Iger replies. There's silence on the line. Then Jobs says, let's keep talking. Negotiations take months. Roy E. Disney is initially against it. Walt built Disney on his own animation. Buying Pixar is admitting we lost. But Iger is right. Disney Animation is dead. They've closed their traditional animation studios in Florida. Their last genuine success was The Lion King more than 10 years ago. They need Pixar not just for its films, but for its talent. On January 24th, 2006, Disney announced its acquisition of Pixar for $7.4 billion. It was the largest acquisition in Disney's history. But the cool part of the deal isn't the price. It's the structure. John Lasseter, Pixar's chief creative officer, becomes creative chief of all Disney animation. Ed Catmull, Pixar's president, runs both studios. Essentially, Pixar is buying Disney, not the other way around. The losers now respond to the winners. And it works. Under Lasseter, Disney animation is revived. Bolt is decent. Tangled is excellent. Frozen is a cultural phenomenon generating over $1.2 billion globally. But Iger isn't done. He's studying what matters to modern audiences. And one thing stands out: superheroes. Marvel Entertainment has been producing successful films, Iron Man and The Incredible Hulk. But Marvel is in financial trouble, having mortgaged the rights to its characters to several different studios. In August 2009, Iger called Ike Perlmutter, CEO of Marvel. How much for the whole company? The answer: for $1 billion. Disney's board thinks Iger has lost his mind. Marvel is comics for nerds. It's not Disney. Walt Disney built an empire on families. Marvel is violence and explosions. But Iger sees something they don't. Marvel has 10,000 characters. It's an untapped gold mine of intellectual property. And with the right creative control, they can build something unprecedented. A shared cinematic universe where all the films connect. The purchase was completed on December 31st, 2009. Disney now owns Iron Man, Captain America, Thor the Hulk, and will eventually regain the rights to Spider-Man and the X-Men. Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, sells Iger a crazy idea: to make a movie where all the Marvel heroes appear together. The Avengers. Something like this has never been done. Coordinating multiple franchises into a single narrative is logistically insane. But if it works, it will create something addictive. Fans will have to watch every Marvel movie to follow the full story. It's episodic television applied to big-budget cinema. On May 4th, 2012, The Avengers premieres. It earns $583 million in its global opening weekend. It ends with $1.5 billion total. It's the third highest grossing film in history at the time. And it's just the beginning. Marvel would go on to produce 23 interconnected films over the next decade, generating over $22 billion. Disney has discovered the formula for printing money. But Iger has one final obsession: Star Wars. George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, is getting older. He made the prequels, which were financial successes but critical disasters. He's tired of being hated by fans who feel he ruined his own creation. In 2011, Iger approached Lucas with a proposition: sell me Lucasfilm. I'll pay you whatever you ask. And I promise to treat Star Wars with respect. Lucas, surprisingly, is interested, not because of the money, he's a billionaire, but because he wants Star Wars to survive after his death. He wants to pass the torch. On October 30th, 2012, Disney announced the purchase of Lucasfilm for $4.5 billion. It includes Star Wars, Indiana Jones, and Industrial Light and Magic Technology. The public reaction is mixed. Star Wars fans are terrified. Disney will make Star Wars for kids. They'll water it down. They'll ruin it. Lucas includes treatments for 3 new Star Wars films, Episode 7, 8, and 9, in the deal. But Iger makes a brutal decision. He completely ignores Lucas's treatments. Lucas feels betrayed. He publicly compares Disney to white slavers who stole his babies. He later retracts his statement, but the damage is done. The Star Wars creator hates what Disney is doing to his legacy. Disney hires J.J. Abrams to direct Episode 7, The Force Awakens. The strategy is simple. Give fans what they want. Nostalgia, original characters, practicality instead of excessive CGI. On December 18, 2015, The Force Awakens opens. It earns $248 million in its U.S. opening weekend, the biggest in history. It closes with $2,068 million worldwide. It is the third highest grossing film ever made. Disney has revived Star Wars, but at a cost. The subsequent films, The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker, will brutally divide fans. Creative decisions will alienate the original base while trying to attract new audiences. And there's a deeper problem. Disney is producing so much Star Wars content so fast that the magic is diluted. The one special franchise feels like a corporate manufacture. In December 2017, Iger made his boldest move yet. He bought 21st Century Fox for $71 billion. It's the largest corporate acquisition in entertainment history. Disney now owns Fox Studios, FX Networks, National Geographic, and, crucially, the movie rights to Marvel's X-Men and Fantastic Four. Disney now controls approximately 40% of all U.S. box office sales. They own the most valuable franchises in entertainment: Marvel, Star Wars, Pixar, Disney Animation, Fox. It's a monopoly in all but name. Regulators approve the acquisition, but with concerns. Is it healthy for a single company to control so much of popular culture? But Iger isn't satisfied. He sees the future: streaming. Netflix is destroying the traditional television and film model. People want on-demand content, whenever they want, wherever they want. In November 2019, Disney launched Disney Plus. It's a streaming service featuring the entire Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, and Pixar libraries, as well as exclusive new content. The response is explosive. 10 million subscribers on the first day, 50 million in 5 months, 137 million in 2 years. Disney has successfully entered the digital age, but there's a cost. To feed Disney Plus, they need to constantly produce content. Marvel series, Star Wars series, original movies. It's a machine that demands constant feeding. Quality suffers. Not everything can be exceptional when you produce so much so quickly. Then comes 2020. The COVID-19 pandemic shuts everything down. The theme parks, Disney's largest source of profit, shut down completely. Film productions halt. Cruises are canceled. Disney loses $7 billion in 2020. 28,000 park employees are laid off. The stock falls 30%. Iger, who had planned to retire, is postponing his departure to guide Disney through the crisis. This is his 5th extension. The man who was set to retire in 2015 is still leading the company 5 years later. But the pandemic also accelerated Disney Plus. With people stuck at home, subscriptions exploded. Disney Plus became the only lifeline. Finally, in February 2020, Iger handed over control to Bob Chapek, his chosen successor. Chapek comes from the theme parks industry. He's an operator, not a creative. Under Chapek, Disney had become a brutal profit-maximizing machine. It has raised park prices to record levels. It has eliminated perks for annual pass holders. It has prioritized profits over guest experience. On the creative side, he makes disastrous decisions. He fires key creatives. He publicly feuds with Scarlett Johansson over the release of Black Widow. He alienates LGBTQ employees by mishandling Disney's response to anti-gay legislation in Florida. The stock price collapses. Employees revolt. Fans are furious. After just 2 years, in November 2022, the board fires Chapek and begs Iger to return. Iger returns as CEO in November 2022. This is the 6th time he's postponed his retirement. He's 72 years old and still running Disney because no one else can. His first action: completely restructure the company. He lays off an additional 7,000 employees. He cancels underperforming projects. He reduces production of Marvel and Star Wars content because quality is suffering. It's brutal but necessary. Disney had expanded too rapidly under Chapek. Iger must shrink the empire to save it. But there are costs that no restructuring can repair. The Disney magic has been diluted. When you produce 5 Marvel series a year, none of them feel special. When there's a Star Wars movie every year, the event becomes routine. Theme parks, once places of escapism, now require extensive planning and budgets of thousands of dollars for a family of 4. The spontaneity and accessibility Walt envisioned have been replaced by algorithmic profit optimization. And there's a deeper question. What does Disney represent now? It was once synonymous with family, innocence, and imagination. Now it's Marvel violence, Star Wars war, and Fox adult content. The empire Walt built on a mouse now devours entire franchises and spits them out as content. It's impressive. It's profitable. But is it still Disney? In 2023, Disney celebrates 100 years since its founding. They produce commemorative short films. They release special merchandise. They talk about Walt's legacy. But there's one awkward question no one wants to ask in public. Would Walt recognize the company that bears his name? It has grown from an animation studio in a garage to a $200 billion media conglomerate that controls much of global popular culture. It owns franchises Walt never imagined. It operates on business models that didn't exist in his lifetime. Some argue that this is exactly what Walt would have wanted. Constant innovation, aggressive growth, industry dominance. Walt always thought big, always took risks. Others argue that Walt would be horrified. The soulless corporatization, the algorithmic exploitation of nostalgia, the sacrifice of quality for quantity. Walt cared obsessively about every detail. Would he approve Marvel series produced so quickly that the CGI effects look unfinished? It's 2024. Bob Iger announces, for the 7th time, that he will retire, this time in 2026. No one believes him. But the real question isn't who will replace him. It's whether Disney can survive its own success. The empire is so vast it could collapse under its own weight. The costs of producing content for Disney Plus are cannibalizing profits. The theme parks have reached the maximum price the market will tolerate. The franchises are exhausted. And there are competitors, Netflix, Amazon, Apple, all fighting for the same audience with unlimited budgets. For the first time in decades, Disney faces a real possibility. They could lose. Not go bankrupt, ever, but they could become irrelevant. Just another giant media company, indistinguishable from the others. The final question is philosophical. Can an empire built on dreams survive when it becomes a corporate content-generating machine? Walt Disney created magic by selling dreams. Can Disney survive in a world that no longer believes in magic? To answer that, we must go back to the beginning, to a boy in a barn with a lump of coal, to a man who lost everything and got it back, to the simple truth that built an empire. Dreams are powerful, but dreams also die. Episode 8, The Eternal Dream, 1906. A 5-year-old boy draws on a white wall with charcoal. His father will beat him for this. But in this moment, the boy feels only pure joy. He has created something that didn't exist. That boy doesn't know he'll die at 65, consumed by cancer caused by a cigarette addiction. He doesn't know he'll build and lose multiple fortunes. He doesn't know he'll be betrayed by the people he loves. He doesn't know his name will become synonymous with childhood for 1 billion people. All he knows is this: he can draw, and drawing makes him happy. That happiness, that pure joy of creation, is the seed of everything that comes after. Every movie, every park, every empire. It all begins with a boy who discovered he could do magic. The question that haunts Walt Disney's legacy is simple. When did the magic end and the business begin? Walt Disney was 3 different men, depending on who you ask. To the public, he was Uncle Walt, warm, friendly, the guardian of childhood, the man who appeared on television every week inviting families to Disneyland, the benevolent genius who only wanted to make children happy. To his employees, he was the boss, demanding, unpredictable, sometimes cruel, a perfectionist who could destroy months of work with a single word, a man who remembered every loyalty and every betrayal. To his family, he was absent, wedded to his work, emotionally distant, unable to separate his identity from his creations, a man who loved abstractly but couldn't connect intimately. All three versions are true. All three are incomplete. The truth about Walt Disney is that he contained multitudes, contradictions that were never resolved. Genius has a price. For Walt, that price was almost everything else. Their marriage survived but never prospered. Lillian was a loyal wife for 41 years, but they lived in separate worlds. Walt worked 16 hours a day. When he was home, he talked about work projects. His daughters loved him but didn't really know him. Sharon would later describe growing up feeling like she was competing with Mickey Mouse for her father's attention, and she always lost. His health was sacrificed on the altar of ambition. The cigarettes, the alcohol, the constant stress, the refusal to slow down even when his body begged for rest. Walt burned his body as fuel to fuel his dreams. His friendships were transactional. People were either useful or they weren't. When they ceased to be useful, Walt discarded them without sentimentality. The betrayal of the 1941 strike permanently hardened him against emotional intimacy. And there are sins that can't be ignored. Walt testified before the House Un-American Activities Committee. He named names. He ruined careers. Some historians defend him. He was protecting his studies in a paranoid era. Others condemn him. He sacrificed principles for convenience. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Walt genuinely believed communists had infiltrated his studio, but he also used that fear as a weapon against anyone who challenged him. There's also its complicated relationship with racism. Disney's early films contain horrific racial stereotypes. The crows in Dumbo, the Native Americans in Peter Pan, the Siamese cats in Lady and the Tramp. Was Walt personally racist? Records are contradictory. Some minority employees remember him as fair. Others point out that his studio was almost entirely white until decades after his death. Most likely, Walt was a product of his time, not actively malicious, but blindly unaware of how his decisions perpetuated harm. Disneyland was Walt's answer to mortality. If he could build a perfect place, something that physically existed in the world, perhaps it would survive beyond his death. And he did. Disneyland is visited by 18 million people a year. Walt Disney World by 58 million. Together, the Disney parks globally receive more than 150 million visitors annually. For many, especially Americans, visiting Disney is a religious ritual. Families save for years. They plan obsessively. They pass down traditions through generations. Walking down Main Street, USA is, for many, like entering a temple. The outside world disappears. Worries evaporate. For a few hours or days, you could believe in magic. It's exactly what Walt wanted. Complete control over the experience, creating a world where every detail reinforces the illusion of perfection. Except the temple now charges $150 per ticket. Middle-class families can no longer afford a visit without going into debt. Magic has a price, and that price excludes. Disney parks have become destinations for the wealthy. Walt Disney's American Village is now beyond the reach of the average American, and the experience has been algorithmically optimized to extract maximum money. Genie Plus, the paid fast-track system, overpriced food, merchandise at every corner. Every step is designed to open wallets. It's not necessarily evil. It's just efficient capitalism. But it feels like a betrayal of the spirit of what Walt wanted to create, a place where families could escape together. Modern Disney films are technically impressive. Frozen, Moana, and Encanto are visually stunning. Marvel films are well-oiled entertainment machines. But something is missing. The strangeness. The willingness to take risks that define films like Fantasia and Bambi. Disney now produces with testing committees and audience algorithms. Every decision is data-driven. The result is competent films that rarely surprise. You know the structure. You can predict the emotional twists. The songs are at specific moments. It's artistic craftsmanship. Walt was many things, but never a sure thing. He bet everything on crazy ideas. He produced Fantasia knowing he would probably lose money because he needed to prove something to himself. Would the modern Disney company make Fantasia? No chance. Too risky. Too weird. Not marketable enough. Here's a central paradox. Walt Disney, the artist, would never have survived in the company that Walt Disney, the entrepreneur, built. If young Walt from 1928, hungry and desperate, came to the modern Disney company with Steamboat Willie, he would be rejected. Too simple. No character arc. No merchandising potential. The company has optimized so much for success that it has lost the ability to fail interestingly. And failing interestingly is how you create something genuinely new. Of all Walt's legacies, Epcot is the saddest. The city of the future he envisioned, where technology and planning would improve human life, was never built. Instead, there's an educational theme park that bears his name but betrays his vision. It's Disneyland with intellectual pretensions. Why was the real Epcot never built? Because without Walt to push the impossible, executives opted for profitability. A city would require decades of losses before becoming viable. A theme park could turn a profit immediately. It was the right decision financially, but it meant that Walt's last and greatest dream died with him. How do we judge Walt Disney in 2024? By the standards of his time or ours? By modern standards, it's easy to find fault. He testified before WAC. His films contained casual racism. He ran his company like a benevolent dictator. But by the standards of its time, it was progressive in many ways. It employed women in creative roles when few studios did. It paid decent wages. It provided unusual benefits. The truth is, legacy is always complicated. Walt Disney created joy for billions. He also caused pain for hundreds. Both are true simultaneously. If Walt Disney could see his empire now, what would he think? You'd be amazed by the technology, the CGI effects, the advanced animatronics, the immersive experiences in the parks. He would be proud of his global reach. Parks in Tokyo, Paris, Shanghai, Hong Kong. His American dream exported to the world. But he would also be horrified by some things. Quantity over quality. Prices that exclude working-class families. The corporatization that turns art into content. Walt was a contradiction. An artist who loved money. A dreamer who was ruthless in business. A man who wanted to control everything but inspire creativity. His company inherited those contradictions. That's why Disney can simultaneously produce genuine art and corporate garbage, because both impulses were within its founder. Walt Disney represented a specific version of the American dream, that talent and hard work can overcome any obstacle, that a poor boy from Missouri can become one of the most influential men of the century. That narrative inspired generations. It proved that the impossible was possible, but it was also a lie, or at least an incomplete truth. Walt had talent and hard work, yes, but he also had luck, timing, a brother with financial sense, opportunities that aren't available to everyone. The modern American dream feels dead to many. Upward mobility has stalled. The rich get richer. The poor stay poor. The path Walt traveled is closed the most. And ironically, Disney contributes to that inequality. It pays park workers minimum wages while executives earn millions. It maximizes profits for shareholders while cutting labor costs. So how does history judge Walt Disney? Like a genius. That's undeniable. He revolutionized animation. He invented the modern theme park. He changed entertainment forever. As a businessman, he built an empire that survived decades after his death. He created a model of vertically integrated intellectual property that all modern companies emulate, like a troubled man, with flaws, with sins, with contradictions he never resolved. The honest answer is, Walt Disney was all of these things. We can't separate the genius from the tyrant, the dreamer from the informer, the artist from the capitalist. He contained multitudes, like all great humans. Let's go back one last time to that barn in Marceline, the boy with the charcoal, the first drawing on a white wall. What would have happened if Elias hadn't hit Walt that night? What if Walt had learned that creativity was acceptable not punishable. Maybe I would have been happier. Maybe I would have been healthier. But maybe I wouldn't have had the desperate hunger that fueled 50 years of incessant creation. Pain forged genius. Trauma created ambition. The battered boy became the man who had to prove his worth to the world again and again. In his final days in the hospital, delirious from morphine, Walt muttered about unfinished projects. Epcot, Florida, the future. He was never at peace. Until the very end, there was more to build, more to prove, more to create. And maybe that's the true legacy. Not the movies or the parks or the corporate empire, but the idea that the work is never done. That there's always the next dream, the next impossible project. Walt Disney taught the world that imagination could build real kingdoms, that drawings could walk, that mice could talk, that dreams could become castles of stone and steel. But it also taught something darker, that success is never enough, that genius often comes at a terrible cost, that building empires requires sacrificing almost everything else. The boy in the barn with the coal didn't know any of these things. He only knew that he could create. And that innocence, that pure joy before the world complicated everything, is what the Disney empire has been trying to sell for 100 years. They're not selling movies or toys or park tickets. They're selling the memory of when you believed in magic, when dreams seemed possible, when everything was ahead and nothing had gone wrong yet. They're selling childhood. And childhood, by definition, can't last. It's midnight at Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom. The guests have left. Workers have cleared the streets. The lights on Main Street have dimmed. Cinderella Castle rises against the Florida sky, illuminated but empty. There are no crowds, no children's laughter, no camera flashes capturing memories. Just a fiberglass and steel castle in the middle of a drained swamp, without the public to believe in it. It's just a structure. Magic doesn't exist in materials. It exists in belief. Walt Disney understood this better than anyone. He spent his life building things that only worked if people chose to believe in them. A talking mouse, a singing mermaid, a castle where dreams come true. And billions of people chose to believe, because they desperately wanted magic to be real. Because life is hard and cruel and disappointing, and they needed a place, even if only for a few hours, where everything would end happily. Walt didn't give people what they needed. He gave them what they wanted. And it turned out that what they wanted was more powerful than any need. So was it worth it? The nervous breakdowns, the ruined marriages, the sacrificed friendships, the early death caused by stress and cigarettes? For Walt, the answer would have been yes without hesitation. Because he didn't know how to be anything else. He didn't choose to create any more than he chose to breathe. It was his fundamental nature. For those he loved, the answer is more complicated. Lillian lived 20 years after his death, never remarried, and fiercely protected his legacy. Did she forgive him for the decades of emotional absence? She never said so publicly. Her daughters built their own lives, defined in part by rebelling against her name, in part by honoring it. The burden of being Walt Disney's daughter never lifted. For millions of Disney employees over the decades, the answer varies. Some remember him as an inspiring genius, others as a capricious tyrant. Most probably as both. For the world, Walt Disney created something undeniably valuable, a respite from reality, a refuge from the harshness, a reminder that imagination matters. But it also created something darker, the idea that happiness can be bought and packaged, that human experience can be honed and controlled, that entertainment can replace meaning. There's a story Imagineers tell, probably apocryphal but thematically true. After Walt died, the workers found his office exactly as he left it. Plans spread out on his desk. Cigarettes in the ashtray. A half-empty coffee cup. No one touched anything for years. They kept the office as a sanctuary, as if Walt could return at any moment and pick up where he left off. Eventually, of course, they cleaned it up. They made the space functional. But the image remains, a place preserved for someone who will never return. That's the modern Disney empire. A place preserved for a vision that died with its creator. They work. They earn billions. But they haunt the ghost of a man who will never again approve or reject their decisions. They ask, what would Walt have done? But Walt can't answer. And in his silence, they project whatever justification they need onto him. Walt had become a mirror through which the company sees what it wants to see. A visionary when they need inspiration. A businessman when they need to justify toughness. A dreamer when they need idealism. A pragmatist when they need excuses. The truth is this: Walt Disney was a man. Brilliant, yes. Transformative, absolutely. But just a man with all the contradictions and flaws that entails. The mistake we all make is treating him as more than human, as a saint of the imagination, or as a villain of capitalism. Either narrative is simpler than the messy truth. Walt had moments of genuine kindness. He helped employees in financial straits. He cried at movie premieres because he was overwhelmed by the beauty of what his team created. He spent hours at Disneyland simply watching families enjoy themselves together. He also had moments of calculated cruelty. He fired people without warning. He named names before whack. He prioritized projects over people time and again. Both versions are true. Because people are complicated. We contain kindness and selfishness, generosity and stinginess, vision and blindness, all simultaneously. Walt Disney's legacy isn't the movies, the parks, or the corporate empire. It's the question he poses for all of us. What are we willing to sacrifice for our dreams? Our time? Our relationships? Our health? Our principles? Walt sacrificed almost everything, and he achieved the impossible. But he also died alone in a hospital room, whispering about unfinished projects, never satisfied, never at peace. Let's imagine a final scene that never happened. Walt Disney, 80 years old, having survived cancer through some medical miracle. He's retired. He lives quietly in Los Angeles with Lillian. He no longer works. He no longer creates. One afternoon, his 6-year-old granddaughter visits. She asks him to draw something for her. Walt hesitates. He hasn't drawn in years, but he finds a pencil and paper. Draw a mouse. Simple, unpretentious, not a stylized billion-dollar Mickey Mouse. Just an ordinary mouse, like the ones who lived in that Kansas City garage where it all began. The girl smiles. That's cute, Grandpa. And in that moment, Walt feels something he hasn't felt in decades. The pure joy of creating without expectations, without pressure, without needing it to be perfect or profitable or revolutionary. Just a man drawing a mouse to make a girl smile. That scene never happened. Walt never retreated. He never slowed down. He never found that peace. But maybe in some alternate universe, he did. And in that universe, he learned what it took him a lifetime to discover. The greatest magic isn't in building empires. It's in those small moments of connection. A grandfather and a granddaughter. A pencil and paper. A simple drawing that won't change the world but will brighten a small corner of it. If Walt Disney could speak now, if he could see everything his empire has become, perhaps he would say this: I did the best I could. I made bad decisions. I hurt people. I sacrificed too much. But I also created joy. I employed thousands. I gave families memories that would last for generations. I'm neither a hero nor villain. I was a dreamer who had the luck and the drive to make some of those dreams come true. If my legacy teaches anything, let it be this: pursue your dreams. Yes, but don't forget to live while doing so. Don't sacrifice everything on the altar of ambition. Empires are impressive, but they are cold. Relationships are complicated, but they are warm. And in the end, when they're lying in that hospital bed, it won't be the empires they'll remember most clearly. It'll be the small moments. Their wife's hand in theirs. Their children's laughter. The first time they drew something and felt that spark of magic. That spark is real. Everything else is just business. But Walt never said those words, because he never learned those lessons. He died chasing one more dream. And perhaps, in the end, that's also his legacy, the warning as much as the inspiration. Epilogue: the barn is still there. In Marceline, Missouri, the barn where Walt Disney first drew still exists. It has been restored and preserved as a historic site. Tourists visit every year. They walk through the same space where a 5-year-old boy discovered he could create magic with charcoal and a white wall. The original drawings disappeared long ago, whitewashed by a father who didn't understand what he was destroying. But the space remains. And in that empty space, you can almost feel the echo of something important that began there. A dream, an ambition, a need to create that would consume an entire life and change the world. The barn is empty now. But like Cinderella's castle at midnight, it doesn't need to be full to mean something. The magic was never in the walls or the charcoal. It was in the belief that drawing mattered, that imagination had power, that a child with nothing could create anything. That belief built an empire. That belief destroyed a man. That belief still resonates. A century later, every time someone closes their eyes and allows themselves to dream the impossible. Walt Disney, the boy who drew in the dark, the man who built castles of dreams, the genius who sold his soul for a mouse, and the ghost that still haunts every decision of the company that bears his name. Her story doesn't have a happy ending, because real stories never do. They only have true endings. And the truth is this: Walt Disney created something extraordinary, and he paid an extraordinary price to create it. The rest of us must decide if it was worth it. That's the question we live with. The question every dreamer must answer. How much of yourself will you give for magic? Walt gave his all, and the world is still deciding whether we love him or fear him for it. Maybe the answer is both. Like Walt himself, complicated, contradictory, and absolutely unforgettable.